Okay, everything's set. Okay, we're gonna first sing a little more. But many of you will not be familiar with this song. But you can listen. It's also. We sing traditionally this time. Hey Krishna, Karana Sindhu, Dinabandhu Jagatpate, O Krishna, Radhananda Namaste, Bhaktakam Sharadoram, Radhe Radharishwari, Vishamam Sudhi, Pranamami. Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasudeva Gaura Bhakta-vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama Jaya Shri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda Jaya Jaya Shri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda Jaya Advaita Chandra Jaya Advaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta-vrinda Jaya Jaya Shri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda Jaya Advaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta-vrinda Jaya Jaya Shri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda Jaya Advaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta speaking in English. I hope that's all right. And we're continuing our discussion of Chaitanya Charitamrita overview. And this is part 3. So those of you coming today the first time, maybe a little incoherent. Let's see. Whoops. Yes. Okay. Right. We have our Russian translation ready. Everyone else is okay with English, more or less? Okay. Are any of you from Bengal by any chance? You're from Bengal? Near Bengal?
Yeah.
Where?
Bengal.
Where it is.
Like Asansol.
Oh, Assam?
Asansol.
Asansol.
State from Mandal.
East.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, interesting. There's Manipur around there.
Yeah.
Nice. Mhm. So we are discussing this very wonderful book, Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, which was composed in the early 16th century. No, early 17th century. Where am I now? 1533, that's 16th century, yes, early 17th century. Sometime from around the beginning, so from 16 something to around 1615, Krishnadas Kaviraj composed this work in Bengali language, mainly Bengali, but there are many verses he quotes in Sanskrit. There's some 500 verses in Sanskrit from different sources, several sources, including Srimad Bhagavata Purana, and from some of the Goswami writings, the followers of Lord Chaitanya. But one can ask, for whom was he writing? For whom was Krishnadas Kaviraj, the great Kaviraj, the great poet? He was a poet in Sanskrit himself. He had written already before he wrote Chaitanya Charitamrita. He wrote a Sanskrit work called Govinda Lilamrita. And it's a quite long, detailed work which describes Krishna's pastimes in the course of one day. the Ashtakaliya Lila, a day in the life of Krishna. Yeah. Maybe we should all kind of move slightly forward this way in case anyone more comes. They will be able to join. So who did he write for? Well, he was writing in Bengali language. He must have been writing for Bengali readers, speakers, right? Yes. He was in Vrindavan. He lived most of his life in Vrindavan. Who has been to Vrindavan? Several of you. Okay, good. Who has not been to Vrindavan, who would like to go to Vrindavan? Okay. Yes. Well, this is what I want to speak a little something about today, is how Sri Chaitanya wanted to go to Vrindavan and eventually went to Vrindavan. This is the subject of aspiration, number 7. For those of you just coming, you see there's a line here that goes from left to right, and then right to left, and then again left to right, in 3 lines. So the first line represents here Adi Lila. This is the first part of Chaitanya Charitamrita, which consists of altogether 17 chapters. And the second part, Madhya Lila, Madhya means little, means middle, and Antya Lila, means end. So beginning, middle, and end of his manifest pastimes, we say, his Lila in this world. And so far, the last 2 days, we discussed ever so briefly the Adi Lila, these 4 features: invocation, incarnation, education, transformation. And we discussed renunciation, when Lord Chaitanya takes the sannyas order. And yesterday we talked especially about the next section, propaganda. And we considered how there's 2 things going on in Lord Chaitanya's pastimes. There's outreach and there's inreach. There's outreach and there's inreach, and they're interacting, these 2 dimensions, in very interesting ways. And one example of this we talked about is Lord Chaitanya's interaction with, or avoidance of interaction with, the king of Odisha, King Prataparudra, who by all accounts, according to all sources, was a sincere follower of Lord Chaitanya. In fact, some historians have argued that because King Prataparudra was so much distracted by devotional life, that he became neglectful of defending the kingdom. And as a result, other kingdoms, neighboring kingdoms, took advantage. But it's debated. I won't go into that, but now we're going to move to the next section, which Kshetra Swami Maharaj has classified as aspiration. To aspire for something is to want to attain, to get something, to accomplish something. That is aspiration. What is the aspiration here? The aspiration is to go to Vrindavan. If we back up a little bit, we go to when Lord Chaitanya became Chaitanya. He was known previously as Vishwambar. There was a kind of nickname for him. He was also known as Nimai Pandit. But when he took the sannyas order from Keshava Bharati in the town of Katwa, which is south of Navadvip, he received the name Krishna Chaitanya, which is not a standard sannyas name. It's a brahmachari. Chaitanya is a brahmachari. It's not a sannyas name. There's 10 main sannyas names, and in our Gaudiya Vaishnava tradition, there are many more. There's a list of some 108 sannyas names, one of which is the name Swami, another is Goswami, but the 10 standard, you could say, traditional ones are Tirtha, Puri, Saraswati, Bharati, Aranya, what else? Aranya, Vana, I believe is one. There's a few others. And in the longer list, one of the names is Keshava. But Chaitanya is not one of the names of sannyasis, but he received the name Krishna Chaitanya. In any case, then what happened? Immediately after he took the sannyas order, he wanted to drop everything and go to Vrindavan. And that's when he began to go to Vrindavan. He was with Nityananda Prabhu and who else? There were 2 others with him. And they were going along the Ganga. He must have been thinking they're heading north. The Ganga eventually goes toward the west. But actually they were going south because they end up, somehow they end up on the other side of the Ganga, on the west side. And they end up at Shantipur. Shantipur is south of Navadvip. Of course, he took sannyas in Katwa, which means, yes, he could have been going north from there. But anyway, he comes. We talked about this, that Advaita Acharya, he needs his mother. His mother says, go to Puri, stay there. I want to hear at least news about you. And he agrees. So he eventually goes back to Puri, but he wanted to go to Vrindavan. Why would he want to go to Vrindavan? Well, anybody want to guess? Wild guess.
To meet Krishna?
To meet Krishna? Yes. Yes, he came back from Gaya completely maddened by devotion to Krishna, Krishna Bhakti. He came back to Navadvip, and eventually that propelled him to give up the world. Let me just run to Krishna in Vrindavan. That was his motive. And then when that aim was initially foiled, and he ends up being requested by his mother, don't disappear like your older brother. He was going to disappear like his older brother. He was going to go and never be heard of again, basically. But his mother said, no, don't do that to me. Go to Puri, we'll hear news about you, at least some connection will be there. But now he's in Puri after some years, and he still wants to go to Vrindavan. He really wants to go, and he makes one attempt. Actually, he goes back up to Bengal. He goes to Navadvip. He goes to Ramkeli, which at that time was the capital of the kingdom of Bengal. The king, Hussein Shah, had his capital in Ramkeli. And there he meets Rupa Goswami and Sanatana Goswami, and they're inspired to go to Vrindavan. And Lord Chaitanya wants to go. And he starts to go, and then what happens? There's a problem. And the problem is that so many people are following him. And before he gets very far, Sanatana Goswami says, excuse me, Mahaprabhu. I don't know if he addressed him as Mahaprabhu. Many places in Chaitanya Charitamrita, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is referred to as Prabhu. He's addressed as Prabhu. Sometimes devotees apologize. Nowadays we have this custom that the Swamis are addressed as Maharaj, which is kind of ironic because what's Maharaj mean? It means great king, and it's the last thing that a Swami wants to do or be, is to be a king, but to speak of a great king. But somehow they get called Maharaj. And then sometimes devotees, little bit inattentively, they think, instead of saying Maharaj, they'll say Prabhu, and they go, oh, excuse me, Maharaj. But actually Prabhu, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is being addressed as Prabhu. So what's the problem? Prabhu, what does Prabhu mean? It means master. In any case, Mahaprabhu is on his way, and Sanatana Goswami says, perhaps, Prabhu, I don't think it's a good idea that you go to Vrindavan with such a crowd. That's not the way to enter into Vrindavan. Now this is interesting for us in the context what we're speaking about, outreach, inreach. Remember yesterday we talked about Mahaprabhu's dancing in Ratha Yatra, and this was a highly public situation. So we can say it was all about outreach. But what was going on inside Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, that is highlighted through many passages that he was internally having very intense feelings of his exchange with Krishna in the form of Jagannath. now he wants to go to Vrindavan, which is, this is about an internal kind of direction. But now this crowd wants to come with him, and Sanatana Swami says, don't do this. So Mahaprabhu says, actually you're right. And he abandons his plan to go. Because now he's too public. He can't just tell everyone, go back, I'm going home. They won't listen to him. They want to come because he was very attractive person. I'm very inspired by him. So he said, all right, I'll go another time. He goes back to Puri. And now in Puri, he makes a plan to go to Vrindavan and to leave Puri secretly. And so he arranges with his inner circle of devotees. Let's go back to our circles for a moment. Ooh, smaller. What happened to it? I need this. Oh, I have to search for it again. Okay, that'll take too long for now. Let's just continue. He makes this plan to slip out without being seen, and the devotees arrange for him to have one assistant, Balabhadra Bhattacharya. So his Bhattacharya indicates that he was a Brahmin, and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was himself from a Brahmin background, although technically when you take sannyas, you give up these designations. But still, he wanted to have a sattvic person with him, so this devotee was chosen. And he had, this Balabhadra also had his assistant. So it was actually, but he's never named. It's a little strange, but we don't hear his name. Krishna doesn't tell us his name. And we don't hear from the assistant at all. He's very silent. So the three of them set out, and the plan is to go a different route, not to go the main. Normally one would go north from Puri to Bengal, then one would follow the Ganga, which in that part is called, nowadays it's called the Hooghly. It goes basically north-south, and then it's where it branches into Bangladesh. It becomes the Padma River, but before that it's the Ganga, and it goes northwest. So one would follow the Ganga, and then when the Ganga and the Yamuna meet, where they meet Yamuna at the Sangam, then one follows the Yamuna and eventually you get to Vrindavan. Well, eventually Lord Chaitanya will go to meet the Ganga and follow, but first he's going to go through what is now the state of Jharkhand, and at that time was the Jharikanda forest, or jungle. And apparently it was a quite wild place. I don't know how it is today, but it was quite wild, with lots of animals, including tigers and elephants. And Krishnadas Kaviraj tells us that Lord Chaitanya would meet these animals, and what would he do? Sometimes if a tiger was just lying there sleeping, he would kick the tiger, wake him up, and say, "Chant Hare Krishna." "What are you doing sleeping? Wake up, chant Hare Krishna." And they would wake up and start chanting Hare Krishna. How does a tiger chant Hare Krishna? This is another thing which I wish someone had a video camera to record. Because it goes further than that. Krishnadas tells us, well, he says that Balabhadra Bhattacharya was terrified. And he was just, what is going on? Because Lord Chaitanya would welcome the animals, and he would get them all chanting, not only chanting, also dancing. Elephants, imagine elephants dancing. Monkeys, birds were flying around, everyone singing and dancing. And the deer, and not only, so there's tigers. What is the natural enemy of a tiger? Deer. Rather the other way around. Natural enemy of the deer is the tiger. But according to Krishnadas Kaviraj, when Lord Chaitanya was present, they forgot about their inimical natures, and they would just join together and dance and chant Hare Krishna. And he says, not only that, the tigers and the deer were kissing each other. Now, we're very modern, skeptical people. We don't believe this, do we? Well, Krishna says, don't be so sure of yourself. When Lord Chaitanya is present, everything is possible. But the point I want to make is, as Krishnadas is really making the point, is that for Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he was already in Vrindavan. When he was going through Jharikanda forest, he was already, for him it was already Vrindavan. He's anticipating Vrindavan, and at the same time he's already in Vrindavan. So that when he actually arrives in Vrindavan, he's fully ready to be absorbed in what for him is a homecoming. This is, I think, what Krishnadas wants us to understand. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he has met Ramananda Roy some years before this, and from him he has heard what is the highest mood of devotion. And as he's hearing it, he himself is unfolding from within that mood of the bhakta, generally speaking, and of the devotees of Vrindavan more specifically, and then most specifically of Srimati Radha Rani. What is it? Radha Krishna Pranaya Vikatir Ladini Shakti Rasmat Ekatmana Vapi Bhuvi Pura Deha Vedam Katantam Chaitanyam Prakadamarana Tattvayam Chaikyamatam Radha Bhava Duti Subalitam Naomi Krishna Swarupam. That Radha and Krishna are one, then they become two, then again they become one, as Lord Chaitanya, they combine. But when Lord Chaitanya goes to Vrindavan, he's in the mood of one of the two. He's in the mood of the gopi in Vrindavan. And so for him it's like a homecoming. He's coming back home. But as soon as he arrives in Vrindavan, what happens? So many people there are attracted to him. It's not just an empty jungle, although it's relatively little populated, still apparently there are a good number of people there. We don't know so much the exact history, what was happening in that area at that time. It's complicated, historians tell us. But in any case, when he came, he was very much welcomed, received, and so we have this again, this internal, external sort of a tension also in Vrindavan. And that is, I think, especially expressed in this interesting story. Many of the people who were living in Vrindavan at that time were very simple people. And the rumor went around that Krishna has appeared in Vrindavan and he can be seen at night. There's a light on the Yamuna River at the place Kaliya Daha, it's called, the place where Kaliya was subdued by Krishna in Krishna Lila. So they were saying, Krishna has appeared again, and he's again, maybe he's dancing on Kaliya, but all they would see is a light in the night. They would say, Krishna is here. And so this rumor was going around. Everyone was saying, Krishna, let's go see him, let's go see him. All going to see Krishna. And this rumor got around to Balabhadra Bhattacharya. He heard this. And he got excited. He wanted to go and see also. And he asked Mahaprabhu, Prabhu, is it okay if I go? Everyone's saying Krishna's there. And when he said that, Krishnadas tells us that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu slapped him. Nonsense. This is not Krishna. It's just a fisherman with his lamp at night. And but aside from that, here he is, Balabhadra Bhattacharya, personal servant of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and he is not aware of who is Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He's not aware. Krishnadas wants to highlight this, irony, that here's the Lord himself, Swayam Bhagavan, Sri Krishna, in the form of his devotee. And his servant is saying, can I go and see Krishna? You. And then he says, some cultured gentlemen come. A few cultured, I don't know, maybe, forget, it says maybe from Mathura, to visit this sadhu. The word has gone around, this really amazing sadhu is here. So they went to see him, and they offered respects, and they addressed him as sannyasis were often addressed, as Narayan. You are Narayan. You are the Supreme Personality of God. But that was another irony. They're perfectly correct in identifying Mahaprabhu as Narayana, but their understanding of what they're saying is wrong. They're thinking, yes, all sannyasis, they are Narayan, and you just take sannyas and you become Narayan. Hare Krishna. So they were saying the right thing, but understanding the wrong thing. Maybe we should go to some of this. Let's see. Just to read a little. Let's go back to here. Oh. Close. Oh, yes. Okay. Oh, I have to connect again. Hold on. Oh, it's just a little slow. Gauradesh, Prabhuji. Yes. Let's do Prabhuji. Yes, okay. And then we go to 18. And let's go to, well, let's go right near the beginning. This is, let's go here. Okay. Okay, so one thing that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu does in Vrindavan is discover Radha Kunda. Who's been to Radha Kunda and Shyama Kunda? Who would like to go to Radha Kunda? Many of you have been and you want to go back. Yeah. It's interesting, I was there in February, and before that in last November. And Govardhan, as those of you who've been there know, it's a quite long and narrow hill, not very high. And on the south end, or near the south end, southwest, is a town, Jatipur. And Jatipur is very much the center for the followers of Vallabhacharya. And Vallabhacharya was a contemporary of Lord Chaitanya. And Radha Kunda and Shyama Kunda, they're on the north end of Govardhan. And Radha Kund and Shyama Kund become the center for the followers of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Most, if not all, of the 6 Goswamis lived there for some time. And it becomes a place of the Gaudiyas. So two ends of the same hill. Anyway, here it's described, Arite Radha Kunda Varta Puchelokastane Ke Hanahi Kahe Kahe Shangir Brahmana Najane. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu asked the local people, where's Radha Kunda? No one could inform him, and the Brahmana accompanying him did not know either. So there was a local Brahmin that he met, and that local Brahmin was guiding, but he didn't know. Tirtha Lukta Jani Prabhu Sharbhaga Bhagavan Dui Dhamno Ketre Alpa Jale Koilasnan. The Lord then understood that the holy place called Radha Kunda was no longer visible. However, being the omniscient Supreme Personality of Godhead, he discovered Radha Kunda and Shamakunda in 2 paddy fields. There was only a little water, but he took his bath there. Now, one of the sort of ongoing themes in very much of Chaitanya Charitamrita is the importance of sacred places. There's a lot of what could be called sacred geography in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. And of course it starts in Navadvip with the Ganga and the bathing in the Ganga when Lord Chaitanya appears. And then with Lord Chaitanya going to Puri. And there are places on the way between Navadvip and Puri which are also important. Some years ago we did a yatra. We started in Puri, a group of devotees, and we went from Puri to Navadvip, so going the opposite direction from Lord Chaitanya, but visiting places where he had visited, many temples and special places along the way. And then Lord Chaitanya from Puri, he goes south, and there's so many holy places there. And what is he doing? Many times he's going inside temples. And what does he do in the temples? He chants and dances. He sees the deity, he becomes very inspired, and he chants and dances. Not only Krishna temples, also Shiva temples. But the main temple where he spends most of his time is, of course, the Jagannath temple in Puri. Most of the last part of his life, every day he will go to the temple and he will have darshan and he will sing and dance, and so many others, they will chant and dance with him. All kinds of people with all kinds of philosophies. He was very non-sectarian, kind of a mood. So anyway, he comes to Vrindavan, and now Vrindavan is the ultimate holy place. And within Vrindavan, there is this one place which is Lupta. Lupta means hidden or lost. And Lord Chaitanya rediscovers. It's going to be several years before it's built out in the way that we see it today, with all the nice stone steps none of that was there. There was just a field, rice field, paddy, and a puddle. And then eventually, Raghunath Das Goswami, someone, I think a merchant, sponsors the excavation and construction of Radhakunda Shyamakunda. So then he takes his bath there. So this chapter 18 and mostly 18 is just describing Lord Chaitanya visiting different places around Vrindavan and also deities, temples, Haridev temple, and the deity of Srinathji, as he's now called by the Vallabhas. It's said that this deity, by the Lord's arrangement, was brought down from the hill so he could take darshan. He didn't want to climb on the hill, so the deity came down on a pretext. And the pretext was there was a threat of attack. This is we're talking about early 16th century. This is before Akbar. Akbar comes to power in 1545. Is it 45? I think so. He reigned for about 60 years. He had a very long name. Anyway, these are, difficult times. And so sometimes there was threat, if not actual attack, from iconoclastic persons of iconoclastic spirit. You know the word iconoclastic? Huh?
What is this?
Iconoclasm means being fiercely against deities. There's iconophiles, those who love deities, and iconoclasts, who want to destroy deities. So there's a long history of this. Anyway, Lord Chaitanya is seeing these deities, and that's mentioned several times in this section. But there's something else going on in this section, and that is because Mahaprabhu has come home. He's, as I said, it's very intense for him. This is what he always wanted to do, come to Vrindavan. Leave this mundane world and just go to Vrindavan. Now he's in Vrindavan, and what happens? Sometimes he's so overwhelmed with intense emotions, he runs and dives into the Yamuna River. And he just stays underwater. He forgets about, I have to breathe. He just dives in the water, remembering that Krishna used to play in the Yamuna as a child. He dives in the Yamuna. And then Balabhadra Bhattacharya comes after him, drags him out of the water, and dries him off. And this is happening one day after another. And at one point, Balabhadra says, Prabhu, please, it's too much. I can't take it. If you're going to be like this, we cannot stay here in Vrindavan. It's too dangerous for you. So my humble request is that we leave Vrindavan. And Krishnadas Kaviraj tells us that's for Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. This is the will of his devotee. And because his mood is to serve his devotees and to please him, he says, yes, if you wish that we leave, then we must leave. All he wanted to do was come to Vrindavan. He's come to Vrindavan, and now he's toured Vrindavan. He's discovered Radha Kunda. But now, after only 2 months, it's time to leave, and he will not return. And so, his aspiration, as Kshetra Maharaj calls it, his aspiration, was it fulfilled? Is there such a thing as an end to say, okay, now I've had enough? It doesn't seem so. Because he will go back to Puri, and in Puri, the last 12 years of his life, he's going to express his longing for Vrindavan. For 12 years, he's going to be just remembering and being reminded of Vrindavan. But meanwhile, and I'll just say a few words more of this. This section 8, this is chapters 19 through 25. I mentioned yesterday these are teachings of Mahaprabhu, first to Srila Rupa Goswami, whom he meets in Prayag. Now, that city has now been, it was Ahmedabad for however many years, and now they've kind of returned back to the old name, Prayag. Actually, they call it Prayag Raj now, I believe. Has a long, the city has an extremely long history. It's like Varanasi. Varanasi is sometimes called the oldest city in the world. It was there before the universe. Varanasi. Anyway, then Prayag. So he follows the Yamuna. He comes to the Sangam, Triveni, and there at Prayag he meets Rupa Goswami. Rupa Goswami is on his way to Vrindavan, so they're going in opposite directions. Why is Rupa going to Vrindavan? Because Chaitanya Mahaprabhu had met him in Ramakeli together with Sanatana Goswami and had requested, please go to Vrindavan and just settle there and reveal the holy places of Vrindavan and write Shastra, to explain what is Krishna Bhakti all about. Which is what he does, and which is what Sanatana Goswami will do, and what Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami is doing in these chapters. He's very much summarizing what the teachings are, which Rupa will then elaborate in his writings in Sanskrit, and Sanatana Goswami will elaborate in his writings in Sanskrit. Remember, Krishnadas is writing in Bengali. He's writing for Bengalis, very few of whom would have been able to read Sanskrit. So these chapters just one chapter, 19, is instructions to Rupa Goswami, and then 20 through 25, 20 through 24 are to Sanatana Goswami. Why would Keshava Maharaj call this section organization? Any ideas?
Lord Chaitanya maybe organizes his devotees to spread the Sanatana mission in that sense.
Yeah, he's organizing a mission, and he's specifically organizing it through these Goswamis. First, Sanatana and Rupa Goswami, who were brothers, and then Gopal Bhatta Goswami, Raghunath Das Goswami, Raghunath Bhatta Goswami, Jiva Goswami. Before these six, he had sent Lokanath Swami, Lokanath to Goswami to Vrindavan. So yeah, organizing that way, but also organizing in the sense of teaching a very systematic, what could be called a theology, a systematic theology. He's teaching them why do we worship Krishna. Well, first of all, he's teaching Rupa Goswami why practice spiritual life. Why should we take up what is spiritual life and why should we do it? Because human form of life is special opportunity to rise above the animal platform. And then to Sanatana Goswami, who begins his lessons with a question, which our Srila Prabhupada many times would refer to. What was Sanatana Goswami's question to Lord Chaitanya?
Who I am? Kingdom? Who I am?
Yes, who am I? Ke ami, kene ame, amai jare tapatroy. Who am I and what is the reason that I'm suffering the threefold miseries? So he came with a very humble question, despite being highly placed, apparently, in the government previously of Hussein Shah. So that's the beginning point, and then he goes from there through the chapters in a very elaborate, systematic way. But my point here is Krishnadas is just giving us a summary. And if we want the full teaching, then we go to the teachings of the Goswamis themselves. Rupa Goswami's Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, first of all. And he wrote other works, but that's the most important for us. Sanatana Goswami, what did he write? Hari Bhakti Vilasa, yes. Well, this is Hari Bhakti Vilasa, yeah. He also wrote the Brihad Bhagavatamrita. Brihad Bhagavatamrita is in the form of a kind of novel, a story, two stories, really, as part one, part two. What else did he write? Stavamala, Rupa Goswami, Sri Krishna, I'm forgetting the names. Anyway, they wrote many, many works. Rupa Goswami wrote 3 dramas, Sanskrit dramas. So, okay, so the geography again. Now, Sanatana Goswami, Lord Chaitanya meets where? In Varanasi, also on the Ganga. So Lord Chaitanya is going back to Bengal, back to Puri. Sanatana Goswami, who he would have liked to go with Rupa Goswami, but he was detained. We are told he was put in prison by the king, and then he had to bribe the jail keeper to get out. So I always like to say this shows that in certain circumstances, bribery is bona fide. Bona fide Vaishnava behavior. So he's delayed, and so they meet in Varanasi. And that is where Lord Chaitanya meets the Prakashananda and his associates, and they have some discussion. And that was going to lead me, let's see if I can do it sort of quickly. Find this. Oh, there it is. Okay. Yeah. Put that away. Bring this out. We started talking about this yesterday. So this is my abstract diagram to show one way of seeing different relationships in Chaitanya Charitamrita. Yesterday we talked about the inner circle here, and then this initial outer circle. The inner circle is Lord Chaitanya and his immediate associates, his friends, his servants, his followers. And then from the different other Vaishnava sampradayas that he would interact with. And then the next ring here is representing what I call other Brahmanical traditions. And specifically an example of this is Lord Chaitanya meeting with Prakashananda Saraswati and his friends, his associates, these sannyasis in Varanasi. And what is this meeting about? Well, it's about another theme which I mentioned, was it yesterday or day before, is the theme of the Digvijay, the conquering of the directions. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, wherever he goes, he's meeting various opposition, persons with different ideas, different philosophy, different theologies. And he's one way or another, he is prevailing over them. Sometimes just with his charm, sometimes with his words, sometimes with a combination. But in the case of Prakashananda, it's a combination. It's his effulgence which initially attracts Prakashananda Saraswati. But then it's his amazingly, sublimely simple and straightforward interpretation of the Brahma Sutra, or also known as Vedanta Sutra, which is again described by Krishnadas Kaviraj in an extremely simple, condensed sort of way. Not, I have to say, what would be called rigorous philosophical analysis. It's quite simple. It's just enough for his audience, Bengalis in Bengal, to understand what is the difference between the Mayavadi and the Vaishnava. The Mayavadi, or the followers of the followers of Shankaracharya, argue a kind of absolute monism, that ultimate reality is one and only one, and all that we experience, including our own individuality in this world, is illusion. That's illusionism. And Mahaprabhu, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, is arguing vigorously and philosophically against that idea in order to defend the principle of Bhakti, which is that we are real, Krishna is real, and the process of serving Krishna with whatever we have is real. And because it's real, we can establish a real relationship with the Lord, which is eternal. So that's really what the whole Chaitanya Charitamrita is about, theologically and philosophically. And episode like this is one example of how the Lord Chaitanya encounters this Brahmanical tradition, which is kind of further away from the core, the center of his life, his culture. And as you see, these rings, we can talk about these more tomorrow, the next ring out. I've identified with 3 different groups, the Shaktas, the Buddhists, and the tribals, because they're all referred to as Pashandi by Chaitanya, by Krishnadas Kaviraj. And then the next group, further out, further away, are Muslims, and there's reference a few times in Chaitanya Charitamrita, different encounters. And then the outermost ring I've identified as consisting of animals, plants, objects, and substances. And we've just talked about animals in Jarikand. And what's interesting there is, although animals are so distant in terms of, culture or anything like Gaudiya Vaishnavism, still, even then, Krishnadas tells us, they were singing and dancing and chanting Hare Krishna. So that's the idea also of these arrows. It's Lord Chaitanya, and he's reaching out and he's connecting with all these different groups. And in some respects, he's bringing them into the center. So it's a dynamic sort of phenomenon. Good. I think we can stop there for now. Hare Krishna. Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu ki Jai. Hare Krishna. Thank you. Om Tat Sat. Question, comment?
Question. If you talked about the outwards and in-reach of Lord Chaitanya, I would like to ask how I could apply to my own devotional life this outreach, but also the in-reach.
The in-reach. Keep reading Chaitanya Charitamrita. Yeah. That will Oh, here's something else we could discuss tomorrow. Okay. Yes, Maurice.
Hare Krishna, Maharaj.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you for the nice lecture. Can you say something about your personal experience at holy places like Vrindavan? What you felt there and how was your experience there?
He's asking about my experiences in holy places like Vrindavan. I first went to Vrindavan in 1978. India as a whole was quite different from how it is now. There were no mobile phones. If you wanted to make a phone call, it was a major action. You had to go into downtown Vrindavan. If you wanted to make a long distance call, you had to book the call. And if you were lucky, you got a connection. The only cars were ambassadors, these yellow ambassador cars, which are built like a tank. They're really solid. And the taxis in Kolkata are still those ambassador cars, designed in 1953. That's a long time ago. They still use the same design. I mean, yeah, what can I say about Vrindavan has been changing a lot. There are some wonderful temples in Vrindavan. One of my favorites is the Radharaman temple. And I've written a chapter in my book, Attending Krishna's Image. Chapter 2 is about the Radharaman temple. I spent 4 months just researching that temple, living next to the temple, going there every day, meeting with the priests, getting to know their culture. Yeah, Prabhupada would say there are 5,000 temples in Vrindavan. I guess if you count all the home temples, now there's probably more than 5,000 because there's so many. How many people live there now? Yes, and Vrindavan, so Mayapur, the same year, 78, we went to Vrindavan, then to Mayapur. And Mayapur was also Sri Mayapur Navadvip. There were, at that time, there were 3 buildings. There was what they called the long building. And they used to say, this is the longest building in Bengal. And then there was the Lotus building, where Srila Prabhupada stayed. And there was Srila Prabhupada's Bhajan Kutir, this bamboo, very simple thatched roof hut, which is still there. It's of course been rebuilt and so on. Now the Bhajan Kutir is right next to the TOVP, which there's the Bhajan Kutir, and then there's the TOVP. It's just a monstrous building next to it. But now it's all become very populated. Before it was just rice fields, everywhere just rice fields. It was beautiful. Yeah. Right. That's a couple of thoughts. I think our translators had enough today. Yes. Okay, thank you all. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu ki jai, Sri Krishna Das Kaviraj Swami ki jai, Ananta Bhakti Vaishnava ki jai, Gauradesh.